In the final blood-choked days of World War II, a voice pierced the static. Calm, resolute, surrounded by fire and ruin. It came from a place no one could trace, and spoke of horrors no one wanted recorded. Who was Claire Whitmore? And why did the world try to erase her? What you're about to hear wasn't meant to survive. But it did. And now, so will the truth. In the winter of 1943, deep within the icy waters north of Scandinavia, a fleet of German U-boats vanished into the Arctic mists. Official Wehrmacht records would claim mechanical failure, severe weather, and Allied destroyers. But the truth, buried under frost and classified by both the Allies and the remnants of the Kriegsmarine, tells the story of U-Flottille 27, an experimental, near-mythical detachment of U-boats known among German officers as Die Schattenflotte, the Shadow Fleet. Conceived by Admiral Karl Donitz in early 1942, U-Flottille 27 was an ambitious gamble. As Allied radar and sonar technology advanced, conventional submarine warfare grew deadlier for the Germans. Donitz authorized a covert program to create submarines that could operate in near-complete silence, powered by new air-independent propulsion systems, and capable of navigating beneath the polar ice shelf. Led by Commander Elias Beck, a brilliant but obsessive engineer, these U-boats were outfitted with silent screw propellers, snorkel enhancements, and hulls coated in an experimental rubber compound designed to absorb sonar pings. The Arctic was chosen for its strategic obscurity. Allied convoys to the Soviet Union passed near Murmansk and Archangel, routes protected heavily by the British Home Fleet and Royal Canadian Navy. But the Arctic ice presented a unique opportunity, a thermal and acoustic barrier that confused sonar and radio waves. Beck believed his subs could effectively disappear, listening and observing Allied shipping and fleet maneuvers without engaging unless absolutely necessary. From a hidden base in the fjords of occupied Norway, U-2717, U-2718, U-2719, and U-2720 departed in late October 1943. Their crews, handpicked from veteran submariners and naval engineers, had undergone months of psychological and environmental conditioning. These men, only 30 aboard each vessel, were sworn to secrecy and stripped from public records. For all intents and purposes, they no longer existed. Initial reports were promising. Encrypted communiques from the fleet showed that the subs had successfully shadowed convoy JW-55B without detection. U-2717 even reported intercepting Soviet wireless codes, information that was sent directly to Berlin via the Abwehr. Yet as winter deepened, the ice grew thicker, and the Arctic night closed in, something began to change. Crew diaries later recovered by British forces painted a grim picture. Ensign Dieter Moll from U-2718 wrote in his journal, Day 42. No sun. The cold bites through the steel. We have seen nothing but darkness. Elias demands silence. No engines, no heat. Only the humming of the hull, like a creature breathing. I dreamed I heard voices coming from beneath the ice. It became clear that the extreme isolation and darkness were eroding morale. Rumors spread of hallucinations, crewmen hearing phantom Morse code or seeing lights beneath the ice. One man reportedly attempted to escape through a torpedo hatch, claiming he heard his wife calling to him through the sea. On December 19, U-2719 ceased all communications. No SOS, no damage report. Just silence. 2 days later, U-2720 followed. Commander Beck, aboard U-2717, reported the disappearance to Berlin using a code reserved for top-secret emergencies. Units 3 and 4 have gone below. Suspect failure in structural integrity or collapse of mental order. Continuing mission. By mid-January 1944, only U-2717 remained in contact. Beck had begun transmitting increasingly erratic reports. He claimed to have found a fissure in the ice shelf that breathes, and recorded sounds that, he insisted, were not whale nor man-made. His final message, intercepted by British listening stations in northern Scotland, was a string of numbers that corresponded not to coordinates but to the music notes of a German lullaby. In February, the British destroyer HMS Hawthorne, part of a hunter-killer group operating in the Arctic, detected faint sonar contacts beneath the ice near the Svalbard archipelago. Captain Anthony Shaw ordered a cautious approach. What they discovered was later classified as top secret by the Royal Navy. Trapped under a jagged collapsing section of sea ice, they found U-2717. The sub had surfaced partially, its conning tower crushed by a falling shelf of ice. Inside were the frozen corpses of the crew, most still at their stations, some huddled together in the engine room. Commander Beck was found in his cabin, seated, a recording device beside him. His log ended with the words, "The sea whispers the truth. It is not ours to understand." British engineers recovered parts of the submarine's propulsion system and notes Beck had taken on the experimental coding. These were quietly passed to both British and American naval research labs. Decades later, it was revealed that these stolen technologies influenced the development of post-war American submarine stealth programs. The surviving elements of U-Flotille 27's story were buried in military archives. The Kriegsmarine denied the existence of a shadow fleet. The Allies, reluctant to admit to having recovered advanced enemy tech, sealed the documents. Yet in 1996, a Russian expedition studying climate change near Novaya Zemlya discovered a rusted, unidentified U-boat sealed in ice, its markings scraped away. The crew's bones were inside, along with a strange rubber-like residue that resisted decay. The Arctic kept its secrets well. Today, among naval historians and conspiracy theorists, the legend of the Shadow Fleet lives on. They speak of submarines that listened beneath the polar cap, that faded into the dark silence, and of men who died chasing ghosts under the ice. No monument bears their names. No war record lists their deeds. But somewhere beneath the melting Arctic, U-2719 and U-2720 may still lie in wait, engines frozen in time, listening for a war that ended without them. In the shadowed corners of Nazi-occupied Paris, where whispers carried more power than bullets and curfews dictated the rhythm of fear, there emerged an unlikely weapon of resistance, a 17-year-old girl named Elodie Laurent. To the occupying German authorities, she was just another quiet French girl living with her grandmother in the Montmartre district. But to the growing network of the French resistance, she was Fleur Rouge, the artist who turned alley walls into battlegrounds of intelligence. Elodie had grown up surrounded by art. Her father, a painter of modest reputation, was arrested in 1940 after refusing to paint Nazi-approved propaganda. He died in a transit camp near Compiègne. Her mother had vanished into the resistance shortly after, leaving Elodie behind with her elderly grandmother and her father's half-finished canvases. But it was in that loss that something inside Elodie hardened, not into hatred, but into a resolve shaped by grief and sharpened by color. She began with simple graffiti, fleurs de lis on lampposts, red stars on street signs. But in early 1943, after witnessing a Gestapo raid near Rue de Martyrs, she painted her first coded mural, a flower market scene on a bombed-out wall across from a known SS checkpoint. What appeared to be a charming Parisian tableau was, in truth, a carefully embedded message. The number of petals on each flower represented the number of guards, their placement mimicked the checkpoint's patrol patterns, and a small basket hidden in the background showed the arrival time of a German supply convoy. A British Special Operations Executive, SOE, agent named Daniel Ashcroft was the first to decipher her code. A former art historian turned saboteur, Ashcroft had been embedded with the local Maquis network and immediately recognized the patterns in Elodie's street art. Through intermediaries, he made contact. From that point forward, Elodie became an essential courier, not for physical objects, but for information disguised as art. Her murals spread across Paris like whispers. Each piece carried intelligence gleaned from overheard conversations, black market dealers, and partisan lookouts. A painting of a lone violinist by the Seine showed troop positions near the Gare de Lyon. A café scene on the side of an abandoned bakery illustrated the license plate numbers of Gestapo officers. In one particularly daring act, she painted a fractured image of Joan of Arc over the shuttered entrance of a Parisian police station, with sword angles and flame heights encoding a planned SS roundup in the 11th arrondissement. That mural saved dozens of Jewish families. The German authorities noticed, of course. At first, they dismissed the works as harmless artistic rebellion. But as patterns began to emerge and operations failed mysteriously, the Gestapo launched an investigation. They called the mysterious painter Der Schattenkünstler, the shadow artist. Posters were ripped down, walls whitewashed, and civilian informants paid to watch for any sign of the elusive hand behind the brushes. Elodie began working at night, using homemade paint mixed from crushed berries, coal soot, and the rare pigments her father had hidden under the floorboards. Her grandmother helped where she could, keeping watch, stashing supplies, and telling anyone who asked that her granddaughter was merely helping with laundry. But the walls of Paris were watching, and the danger grew with every brushstroke. In June 1944, a mural appeared across from the German commandant's temporary headquarters in the Hôtel de Ville. It depicted a bridge over the Seine bathed in golden morning light. In the distance, one could make out a row of church spires. But those spires, when mapped correctly, mirrored the approach coordinates for an upcoming Allied bombing run aimed at softening German logistics ahead of Operation Overlord. It was Elodie's final and most daring piece. 2 days later, she was betrayed. A young resistance courier, under torture, gave up her code name. The Gestapo raided her home before dawn. They found brushes, sketches, maps, and coded pigment recipes hidden behind framed portraits. Her grandmother was struck in the head and later died from the injury. Elodie was arrested and brought to the Rue des Saussets, the Gestapo's Paris headquarters. What followed was brutal. She was interrogated for 6 days. Ashcroft, who learned of her capture too late, tried to organize a rescue, but the operation failed. Elodie refused to speak. In her final interrogation, she reportedly told the officer, "I only painted what I saw. You should ask yourselves why you're so afraid of a picture." She was executed in the Bois de Vincennes on July 3, 1944. Her body was buried in a mass grave. The Germans, furious and humiliated, destroyed several of her murals. But they could not destroy the idea. After the liberation of Paris in August 1944, Ashcroft and other surviving members of the Maquis recovered what they could of her work. Some murals had been preserved in secret. Others lived on in photographs taken by sympathetic locals. One, the Flower Market mural, was hidden for years behind a wooden fence and rediscovered in 1998 during a restoration project. It now hangs in a glass-protected corner of the Musée de la Résistance in Lyon, along with her brushes and a page from her notebook that reads in delicate cursive, *Art is not for silence. *. In modern France, Elodie Laurent is remembered in whispers and quiet memorials. A school in Montmartre bears her name. A single red flower is painted each spring beneath the mural of the violinist. Artists leave their brushes there in tribute. The resistance fought with weapons, radios, and sabotage, but Elodie fought with images. Her war was painted in shadows and color, and in those images, truth lived long after the gunfire ceased. In the tightly controlled desert of Los Alamos, New Mexico, where the United States Army had sealed off an entire mountaintop to build the deadliest weapon known to mankind, an invisible war was taking place. Beneath the calculations of fission rates and uranium isotope enrichment, a quiet figure moved among physicists, secretaries, and military men. Her name was Vera Antonoff, known only to a handful of KGB officers as Agent Veria. Her mission: infiltrate the heart of the Manhattan Project and bring the atomic secret home to the Soviet Union. Officially, Vera was Vera Andrews, a widowed typist from the Bronx. Her fabricated backstory included a marriage to a GI killed in Tunisia, a nursing course she never completed, and a strong patriotic desire to help win the war however she could. To the women she worked with, she was polite, shy, and brilliant with shorthand. In reality, she had been trained by the NKVD since she was 16. Her real identity: the daughter of a Soviet trade attaché and a Polish linguist who had vanished during Stalin's purges. She arrived at Los Alamos in August 1944, assigned to the administrative pool of Project Y, the code name for the central lab. Her credentials were spotless. She had been placed after months of preparation and indirect clearance, vetting through a complex chain of recommendation letters and forged background checks orchestrated by a Soviet sleeper agent within the Office of Scientific Research and Development. Her position allowed her access to critical files, not the equations themselves, but the correspondence. She saw names like Oppenheimer, Fermi, Keller. She typed letters outlining test plans, read drafts of project goals, and memorized code names like Trinity and Gadget. Every evening, when her roommates were asleep, Vera carefully unwound the ribbon from her government-issued typewriter and swapped it with a duplicate. The used ribbon, loaded with partially legible ink impressions of classified documents, was microfilmed using a device hidden inside a false-bottom suitcase. Then the original was re-spooled and reinserted before morning inspection. Her primary contact was a Mexican-American janitor known as El Espejo, the Mirror, who had once trained as a chemist before being forced out of university for political activism. He would empty her trash can every Wednesday and Friday night, coded schedule, taking the concealed microfilm rolls in cigarette packs. The film was passed via a chain of couriers, ultimately reaching Soviet diplomatic pouches in San Francisco. It would arrive in Moscow weeks later, where Soviet physicists pieced together the puzzle. Vera's intelligence allowed Soviet scientists to leap over years of theoretical blind alleys. Diagrams of the implosion lens, yield projections, and the logistics of uranium versus plutonium designs were extracted, copied, and studied. Soviet records declassified in the 1990s revealed that without Agent Veria's work, the USSR would not have had a functioning nuclear weapon until at least 1951. Despite the gravity of her role, Vera operated with cold precision. But in November 1944, her world shifted. She was assigned as a temporary assistant to Dr. Hans Bethe, who treated her not as an invisible secretary, but as a person. He asked her opinions. He taught her snippets of German and physics as a joke. She began to falter. For the first time, she wondered whether she was still serving justice or merely Stalin's paranoia. She had seen the disappearances of friends, the terror in her parents' eyes before they vanished. She had once believed that stopping American nuclear dominance was necessary to preserve peace. But now, watching the brilliant minds around her wrestle with the morality of the bomb, she was unsure. Still, the mission continued. In July 1945, days before the Trinity test, she transmitted her most valuable piece of intelligence, a memo describing the precise schedule and coordinates of the test site in Alamogordo. She hid it within a crossword puzzle sheet handed to a soldier during his smoke break, the down clue answers spelling out the Latin words for sun, fire, and desert. After the successful test, Vera knew she was nearing the end. Her superiors instructed her to remain in place until August. Then something changed. On August 9, 1945, a Soviet signal to her usual drop site failed to arrive. The war was ending, and with Hiroshima and Nagasaki obliterated, priorities shifted. The courier network crumbled. Vera was stranded. Weeks later, an FBI counterintelligence officer named Harold Dixon began reviewing anomalies in internal communications. A janitor had been caught photographing paperwork in a lab trash bin. He cracked under pressure and named Vera. But by then, she was gone. She vanished from her assigned quarters on September 3, 1945, leaving behind only a single burned photograph of her parents and a page torn from a Dostoevsky novel. Asterisk, the secret of man's being is not only to live but to have something to live for. Asterisk. Her fate remained unknown for decades. In 1979, a woman bearing a strong resemblance to Vera was spotted in a photograph taken in Buenos Aires at a diplomatic function. In the image, she stood beside a retired Soviet physicist known for his early nuclear work. She wore pearls and held a glass of wine. When the USSR collapsed in 1991, a former KGB archivist defected to the West and confirmed the existence of Operation Black Echo. He named Agent Veria as the most effective operative in the entire mission. He also claimed she had been exfiltrated from the United States aboard a cargo vessel from Long Beach, disguised as a wounded Red Cross nurse. Her file remains sealed. Today, Vera Antonov's name does not appear on any Los Alamos rosters. Her story is not told in museums or textbooks. But in Moscow's Museum of Atomic History, a painting of a woman with a half-smile and a typewriter sits beneath a caption that reads, Asterisk, the silent architect of balance. Asterisk. Historians now agree, the Cold War did not begin with the bombs dropped on Japan. It began with the ink-stained hands of a woman who typed the future into microfilm, one ribbon at a time. In the ruined heart of Warsaw, where resistance was currency and betrayal meant a bullet in the back of the skull, the name Lukas Keller evoked two different emotions: terror from the Nazis and mystery from the Polish resistance. To the Gestapo, Major Keller was an SS counterintelligence officer, handpicked by Himmler himself to infiltrate the Polish Home Army. To the Armia Krajowa, he was a shadow in their midst, a suspected traitor, a man whose file read simply, "Possible wolf in sheep's uniform." But what no one knew, neither the Nazis nor the Polish partisans, was that Lukas Keller was neither. He was both. Born Lukas Kowalczyk in Munich to a Polish mother and a German father, he grew up speaking both languages fluently and passed easily for either nationality. His mother disappeared during the early years of the Reich after being denounced for anti-Nazi remarks. His father, a loyal Wehrmacht officer, disowned him for asking too many questions. Orphaned by 1938, Keller joined the Abwehr, not out of belief, but because it was his only chance to survive in Hitler's Germany with a fractured past and a perfect accent. Assigned initially to France as a translator, he was reassigned to occupied Poland in late 1942, just as Warsaw was boiling into rebellion. Recognizing his unique profile, Nazi intelligence gave him a new assignment: pose as a deserter from the Wehrmacht and infiltrate the Polish resistance. But Keller had already made his choice. Before even arriving in Warsaw, he had sent an anonymous message via underground couriers to the Polish government in exile in London, willing to spy from within the SS. Motive: atonement. Code name: Wolf. The Poles were skeptical. A German who wanted to work for them from inside the SS? It smelled of trap. But London was desperate for intelligence. They gave conditional approval, assigning an underground contact codenamed Basha, a young courier who had once been captured and tortured, then escaped. Her first task: find this wolf and test his loyalty. Keller arrived in Warsaw in March 1943, embedded with an SS intelligence unit operating out of a requisitioned bank building near Plac Bankowy. His cover: Major Lukas Keller, a former Abwehr officer reassigned to suppress growing partisan networks. His real task: feed critical Nazi intelligence to the Armia Krajowa and sabotage German operations from within. He and Basha met in a bombed-out church on the east bank of the Vistula. She brought a pistol hidden in a prayer book. He brought a coded message detailing the next sweep operation targeting the Zolibors district. She didn't believe him until that raid was cancelled at the last minute, and a week later, a different district was hit, just as Keller had said. From that moment on, she became his lifeline to the underground. Over the next year, Keller passed maps, patrol routes, names of informants, and details of German troop rotations. His most daring act came in November 1943, when he forged a report blaming a loyal Nazi officer for leaking Gestapo secrets. The officer was executed by his own men. Keller's fabricated document was praised as brilliant counterintelligence work by his SS superiors. By early 1944, rumors of a major uprising in Warsaw reached Keller's ears. Operation Tempest, the long-awaited uprising against the German occupiers, was imminent. The Home Army was preparing to take back the city, even as Soviet forces closed in from the east. Keller knew what the Nazis would do in response. He had seen it in Lviv, Krakow, and the Warsaw Ghetto. Retaliation would be swift, brutal, and total. In June, Keller intercepted a series of orders from Berlin, plans to deploy Goliath tracked mines and flamethrower units in the event of a city-wide uprising. He passed the documents to Basha, who handed them off to Allied couriers. British radio broadcasts confirmed receipt days later, but Keller knew it wouldn't be enough. The Western Allies couldn't stop what was coming, and the Soviets were in no hurry to help the Polish resistance. The Warsaw Uprising began on August 1, 1944. Keller, still embedded within the SS, took the greatest risk of his life. He went dark. No contact with Basha. No reports. Instead, he began sabotaging from within, mislabeling supply crates, redirecting air support, and delaying orders under the guise of fog of war. He falsified bombing coordinates that spared entire city blocks. He was nearly caught twice. One of his fellow officers began to suspect him, and disappeared mysteriously 2 days later. Keller never confirmed whether he'd ordered the man's death. The resistance was being crushed. The Nazis responded with horrifying brutality. Civilians were massacred. Entire districts razed. The WWII massacre alone claimed over 40,000 lives in days. In September, Keller made contact again. He met Basha in the sewers under Old Town, her arm in a sling, her voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. He handed her one final message: blueprints for the past building, the last Nazi stronghold in central Warsaw. You'll have to burn them out. That's where the command center is. It's the heart of it all. Then he vanished. The building was taken by the Home Army days later. Keller's intelligence had been correct to the last room. The German lines began to collapse in that district. But by then, the uprising was doomed. The Soviets, waiting across the Vistula, refused to intervene. Warsaw fell. After the war, there were whispers of a German who had worked for the Poles from within. Basha survived the Soviet purges and emigrated to Canada. She told her story to a BBC journalist in 1967, naming Lukas Keller as the only German I ever trusted. His true identity remained uncertain until the fall of the Iron Curtain. In 1992, documents from a Soviet archive surfaced confirming Keller's role. He had been captured by the Soviets in late 1944, trying to cross into neutral Sweden with forged papers. He refused to cooperate with NKVD interrogators and was sent to the Gulag under a false name. He died in Siberia in 1951, cause of death listed only as malnutrition and frostbite. In Warsaw today, there is no monument to Keller. His story is folded into the footnotes of partisan histories. But in a small church in the Praga district, hidden behind a cracked stone altar, there is a name etched faintly into the wall. *L.W. The Wolf. He died as one of us. *. At 3:14 on May 7, 1945, a shortwave radio signal crackled to life from a ruined farmhouse near the Elbe River. It was a woman's voice, weary but composed, speaking in perfect French, English, and finally German. The message was brief, haunting. This is Lieutenant Claire Whitmore, Allied Expeditionary Radio Unit 9. Our position is compromised. Enemy forces in retreat. Civilians sheltering in the cellar. This will be our final transmission. If anyone hears this, remember, truth survives. And then, silence. That broadcast was recorded by a British listening post in Kent and later replayed across Allied archives. But the name Claire Whitmore never appeared in official rosters. No such unit, no such officer. The signal bore no identifying frequency. And yet the voice became legend, a mystery broadcast from the crumbling edge of war. It wasn't until 1998, when Soviet files were declassified in Moscow, that a handwritten note was found among reports of battlefield intelligence. *Whitmore, Claire, known to OSS. Operation Thistle. Believed dead, May 45. Possibly buried near Wittenberg. Unknown if message was authenticated. Now, with evidence pieced together from scattered reports, decrypted field codes, and survivor testimony, the story of Lieutenant Claire Whitmore has begun to emerge, a story of secrecy, sacrifice, and a final voice from the edge of silence. Claire Whitmore was born in 1917 in Boston, the daughter of a bookseller and a suffragist. She spoke fluent French, studied linguistics at Radcliffe, and volunteered for ambulance work in Spain during the Civil War. When World War II broke out, she was recruited into the Office of Strategic Services, where her talents in code-breaking, radio engineering, and languages quickly drew attention. By 1943, she was stationed in Algiers, embedded with a covert signal intelligence group working alongside British SOE operatives. Her job was to decode intercepted Axis transmissions and coordinate airdrops to French resistance cells. But she wanted more than headphones and wires. She wanted to be in the field. Her chance came in early 1944 with the birth of Operation Thistle, a clandestine Allied radio unit composed entirely of women, trained to operate deep behind enemy lines in liberated, or soon-to-be-liberated, zones. Their mission, Maintain communications when traditional infrastructure collapsed. Deliver coded updates. Relay requests from local commanders. And most critically, record what they saw. Whitmore parachuted into occupied France in June 1944, days after D-Day. Disguised as a war widow, she bicycled between villages carrying a concealed transmitter hidden in a violin case. Her reports were clinical, precise, and at times heart-wrenching. Interviews with displaced families, notes on collaborators, warnings about SS reprisals. Her most daring transmission occurred in August 1944, when she hid in a church bell tower during the Battle of Falaise and described in real time the massacre of retreating German forces caught in a deadly Allied pincer. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop speaking. After the liberation of Paris, she was reassigned to the Eastern Front, where the Allied advance stalled against German desperation and Soviet reluctance to coordinate. Her new unit, Radio Unit 9, consisted of 5 operators, 2 American, 1 French, 1 Belgian, and Whitmore as the senior officer. They were inserted into central Germany in March 1945, tasked with following the refugee flows and documenting Nazi atrocities as the Reich collapsed. They settled in a farmhouse near Wittenberg, broadcasting under the call sign TH9, Echo. Their signals were picked up in London, Algiers, and once, inadvertently, by a Soviet mobile listening post, which mistakenly marked them as British spies. By April, Germany was unraveling. Allied forces raced from the west while Soviet troops surged from the east. In the chaos, whole towns vanished. Concentration camps were abandoned or destroyed. One such site, Camp Silbertal, was discovered by Whitmore's team 2 days before the American 104th Infantry arrived. Her broadcast, partially recovered, read, "Civilians held here. No food. SS fled yesterday. Children, some cannot speak. We are recording testimonies. I repeat, Camp Silbertal must be preserved. Evidence must not be lost." 2 days later, the farmhouse was shelled by a retreating German artillery unit. 1 operator was killed. The others, including Whitmore, stayed. Their final transmissions became increasingly fragmented, more human, less official. April 29th, 4 families arrived. All from Dresden. No shelter left. We share what we have. May 2nd, our generator damaged. Batteries low. Signals fading. Requests ignored. Still transmitting. May 6th, gunfire nearby. Children frightened. Still recording. We cannot stop. And then the final transmission. After the war, American forces conducted searches around Wittenberg but found nothing. Locals claimed a group of Allied women had taken refuge nearby but were rounded up by fleeing SS units. No mass graves were ever found. Some said a nearby stream had been used to dispose of the evidence. In 1973, a German farmer clearing land found a rusted radio set buried beneath a collapsed barn beam. It bore a scratched inscription inside, *Whitmore, Echo, tell them. The set was sent to an amateur radio museum in Hamburg, where it gathered dust for decades. Only in 2014, during digitization, did a technician notice the serial matched that of a radio used by OSS forward operators. Further investigation led to a cracked vinyl disc stored alongside it, Whitmore's final transmission, nearly intact. Today, Claire Whitmore's story is taught in some military intelligence courses, not for her tactics or transmissions, but for her voice. The broadcast remains one of the most haunting pieces of war audio ever recovered. It ends not with fear or anger, but quiet insistence. Truth survives. She is remembered not on a monument, but in the call signs of modern NATO communication satellites. One, launched in 2019, was named TH9, Whitmore. It relays encrypted signals across Europe and Africa. Claire Whitmore's body was never found, but her words still echo in the static, waiting for someone to listen. She vanished without a grave, without a goodbye. Just a whisper across scorched earth and broken airwaves. Claire Whitmore didn't seek glory, she sought truth, and paid for it in silence. Her final words weren't a farewell, they were a warning. If you think this is history, think again. Somewhere, in the noise, the signal still waits.